Welcome, fam, to another episode of the Bobo and Flex Show. My name is Bobo and I'm your host, and I'm with the beautiful Flex, also known as Flex Mommy on the internet. We're back with another episode and we're serving you looks. We're giving you videos from across the continent. Like, we're literally on two sides of the continent and we're still serving you video. Can we get an award at this point? Like, the level of technical expertise is just, it's incredible. Stop. I know, right? It just doesn't stop. But today we're talking about expectations. We're talking about red flags, pink flags, and where to draw the line between settling and compromising. Where do you even draw that line? I feel like a lot of people have this very confused. I feel like this is the downfall of a lot of romantic relationships. Not just romantic, actually, even friendships. So we want to dissect this, and we just want to help each other navigate friendships, relationships, and sex a lot better by setting clearer expectations, by knowing when you are settling versus compromising. So let's just jump right into the conversation. Flex, when it comes to relationships, I want to know from you, what would you say are the quintessential red flags, the quintessential deal breakers, the things that are just like, when you see these, you have to run? What are those for
personally or generally?
Let's start with personally, and then we'll go into the general, like some red flags that everyone should look out for.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with red flags that I now look out for, just because, you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. So the first one I look out for is a dependence on drugs and alcohol to engage in anything social. A lot of Australians generally, we've normalised alcoholism and drug abuse. Don't at me if you think this is untrue, because I will come back with statistics. I found out, and I've already had this inkling.
Yeah.
And because I haven't grown up with a lot of drugs and alcohol in my life generally, like I now do drugs, I don't really drink. So it's
really, you'd rather do drugs than drink?
Yeah. Like, I stopped drinking for like 6 years or something.
Oh, wow.
Drinking is not my thing. I don't like the taste. But I like amaretto sours, so if they're available, I will drink those. But if they're not available, then I won't drink.
Yeah.
But I will do drugs. So
casual.
Yeah. So because I didn't grow up around a lot of drugs and alcohol in my family, I'm really not sympathetic to people who are dependent on them. So from being in situationships and relationships with people who have a debilitating preoccupation with the usage of them, it's not my thing. It sort of has a flow-on effect about conversations around addiction and dependency issues and why you use them and do you need them and should you, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, that's not for me. That's someone you can play around with for funsies, but to attach myself to you long-term, no. Lord only knows how that affects your mental health and the way you see the world. So that's a big, big, big deal breaker for me. The second one is somebody who has to over-enthuse our cultural differences, i.e. I only like dating black women, I don't fuck white girls. Like,
it's a no from me. Yeah, no.
I've always wanted to go to the Congo. I really feel like that's my spirit people. And while you may feel that, there is a distinction between someone who's showing appreciation and trying to connect with you versus letting you know that you are being fetishized, and whether or not you choose to see that is your own business, but those things will jump out in ways that you don't want in future. So that is definitely a deal breaker. Somebody who is not ambitious. I don't mean somebody who doesn't have a good job. That's not what I'm saying. Someone who's not ambitious, doesn't strive to make their current situation better than their past situation. You can see it. Sometimes you can't see it for what it is at first, Sometimes people are apathetic. Sometimes they're, indifferent. But there is a clear distinction between someone who lacks ambition and somebody who couldn't care less if their life turned upside down tomorrow. And that's the kind of brazen energy that I refuse to invite into my life. If you don't care about you, you don't care about me. That's another thing.
True.
If you don't, people who don't love themselves, if you don't love yourself and you make it very clear, I'm sorry, it's not it.
You can't. And I also think it's good to make the distinction between someone who's not ambitious versus someone who prefers to live the simple life.
Yes.
And you know that if you're like me and you're bougie, don't force yourself into situations where you're with someone who likes the simple life, because it's going to feel very similar to being with someone who's not ambitious, you know. And it's a thin line.
Yeah,
but you have to be realistic.
Bobo, what are your red flags or your deal breakers?
My deal breakers are, ambition is number one. Just ambition. I'm going to say ambition and intelligence. I'm just going to clump those together, because I need to be intellectually stimulated like all the time. I'm also, where my Gemini jumps out, I get bored really easily, and I'm like very easily distracted. So I just need to not be in a situation that's going to be monotonous. I need to be with someone who's always evolving and growing and self-actualizing, and just not intellectually stagnant. So someone who's as curious as me, someone who is as open to the world as I am, or else it's just going to be really just a boring situation. The next thing is that they need to see, they need to have an underlying philosophy of abundance as opposed to a philosophy of scarcity. Otherwise, we're just gonna bump into some issues in the long run. I feel like I can like be a casual, I can have a casual ting with someone who like believes in scarcity, but in the long term, like I fundamentally believe in like the abundance of nature and of the universe and of my own life. So you need to be on that wavelength. And then you need to eat ass. I'm kidding.
Oh my God!
How the tables have turned. No, never.
I was gonna say, the way I felt my chest tense.
Never, ever. Wow. I think hygiene is another thing for me. Like I can't do messiness. You just need to not have halitosis.
But realistically, how does that manifest? Because, sometimes the lack of hygiene jumps out in really bizarre ways. Like, they may be super tidy, and then you realize that, the same toothbrush they had at the start of your relationship a year ago is the same one that's still sitting there. Or, the sheets may be fresh, but man hasn't washed his hair in how long? Or, it jumps out in different ways. Or you see him wash dishes, and then he uses the sponge and he puts all the soap suds on, and then he just puts it in the dish drying rack, doesn't rinse off the soap.
And then what? Above.
And then what?
Then I have to leave you. Like, I have to leave the process. I have to leave. No, so I know that I'm such a germaphobe and I'm such a clean freak that it's just not. Also, dirty fingernails. Can't do it. I can't do it. I literally cannot do it. I just need cleanliness all around. Like, you need
Auntie
to have
says
your bed
she can't
made.
do it.
When I come over, your bed needs to be made. There needs to be not a single speck of dust. I need to not see dirty fingernails. Your hair has to be washed, skin moisturized, elbows hydrated. All of it. You just have to look like a glazed donut. And if not, no funny scents, no funny smells.
I call them miscellaneous, and you just can't catch it. You're like, which one is that? Where's that coming from?
Like when the breath is hot. But I saw on your story the other day.
Yeah.
You were not only talking about red flags, you were also talking about pink flags, which are the things that you don't quite see right away.
Yeah.
But they sort of jump out later on in the relationship. Can you elaborate on what a pink flag is and how to detect one?
A pink flag came into fruition through a conversation I had with an amazing IG friend, fam, follower called Anima, and the discourse is always popping. So I've got this came to fruition through a discussion with her, but we're talking about, what about those things that you register in hindsight as sus behavior? They weren't clear enough initially for you to be like, I'm going to write this person off, but they have manifested in a way that you're kind of like, oh, I should have seen it for what it was earlier on. Right. And so when I posed this question to my audience online, I was just getting red flags in response. Like, when somebody it doesn't remember the names of your family members and it's been 6 months, that's a red flag. When somebody doesn't care about your interests, it's a red flag. When somebody doesn't ask you questions in return, it's a red flag. Let it be known. Don't paint it. It's sriracha red. It's menstruation red. Don't paint it any other color. Know it to be true. And if you want to waste your time, like I often waste my own time, then that is okay. But don't try and tell people that it's a pink flag. So these are some examples of proper pink flags that I have thought of myself and that have come to me through discussion. So a pink flag to me is somebody who is too loud in commonly quiet spaces. In the library, in the GP waiting room, at the bank, and you're kind of like, babes, like, can you just please bring it down a little bit? And they don't want to play.
That's a pink flag.
Because if you don't have any self-awareness of how you inhibit spaces, like you're coming in like a wrecking ball with no respect for people's like space, their personal preference. You don't have like perception of environment outside of your own, and that's insane to me. This is not like a line in the sand, like don't speak loudly at the bank. But if you really can't see how that's inappropriate behavior, and if you can't wait to have that conversation quietly or like loudly outside of that environment, then what are you doing? How have you not like learned that social cue? So that's a pink flag to me. I don't like it. Another one is people who don't pay for their public transport or who steal from corporations. Because for me, I know people like out here, you know, doing the work, fighting against the man. They don't feel like they want to feed into these capitalist structures, and so yes, they will do things like not pay for their transport because they think that it should be their value, or it should be something given to them, or they shouldn't have to pay at, you know, big corporation fucking supermarket chains, because why should they, you know?
Right.
And so those are things to me, I'm like, if that's your form of activism, then I'm gonna acknowledge it. But, you know, who knows if that's... It's a no from me, but I'm going to acknowledge it. Also, people who rest their cups, their mugs, or their plates too closely to the edge of the table. Close enough that it could fall over and break. Why are you inviting danger into your life that way? Why don't you want to protect yourself?
I'm crying.
Let me know if these are not pink flags, because these are things you see and you're like, you know, it's been 2 months, I don't want to call it out, it's still chill, but it makes you feel some kind of way.
Yeah. It's something, okay, how do you differentiate between like just a personality trait versus a pink flag? So for me, I'm a terrible texter. I will take 8 business days to text someone back. Would that be a pink flag?
Absolutely.
Why would it be a pink flag?
Excuse me, sorry.
No, you're good.
It's a pink flag purely because it's a behavioral flaw that somebody is going to find frustrating eventually. I know for me, I'm an 8-day texter as well. Until I'm trying to finesse someone new into my life. Then I'm texting you day, evening, night, weekends, public holidays. And that'll teeter off. But that is just that's what do you call it? That's what's the word I'm looking for? A cue that I'm obsessive and then avoidant later on. Like, you see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't want to speak to you all the time, if you're not a priority to them, it's just what it is. You see the text and you choose not to reply, it's avoidant behavior. On a minor scale, but still avoidant behavior.
Yeah.
Granted, though, I now like to enter relationships how I want to finish them. So
how do you set your expectations and your boundaries?
I asked for clarification on behavior. And I gave a girl who was in my DMs the other day the same advice. Like, how we interpret pink flags or red flags are purely based on our past experiences. And so if we've only attributed proximity of hangouts, or like, you know, the duration of how long we talk to like how much you care, then you're always going to see someone who talks to you more often and someone who cares about you more often. That's not the case.
Right.
Like, for me, I'm a very investigative. There you go. Person. Very curious. So even if I don't like you or don't want to spend any more time with you, I will ask you so many questions for context. People assume that is a general romantic interest. It's not.
Yeah,
so the next day when you text me and I say, oh, I'm not interested, don't come call me a witch or a Jezebel because I led you on. I just like to ask questions. And so similarly,
I actually cannot believe how much we're the same person and at the same time the exact opposite.
So yeah, you have to be a big bitch and you have to ask for clarification. You have to say, I don't know if this is you trying to avoid my text or if I'm just reading too much into it. Right. But generally, when I want to speak to someone, I don't wait 8 days to reply to their text. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. It can be chill, but you can't keep looking at your interpretation of behavior as the benchmark for it.
Yeah. I also think maybe, as a generation, we might have to reconceptualize the norms and the standards and the expectations around our dating lives. Mm-hmm. On one hand, I also feel like there's... so a friend of mine who actually listened to our podcast on friendships was telling me that she feels that, after listening to our episode, we have a generational issue where, no one really wants to be held accountable for their behavior because everyone sort of... We're so liberal now that it's if you show up 3 hours late to a date... It's just yeah, but you have to accept me for who I am. This is who I am.
What's the problem with that? If you waited 3 hours for someone to show up to a date, that's your L. Not me, the person who showed up 3 hours late. You teach people how to treat you.
First of all, I feel attacked because I've definitely waited hours.
No!
This was a friend though. So this was a friend that I used to work with, and she consistently showed up late to but hours late, literal hours. And that's what the question is. Am I Boo the fool because I allowed her to keep treating me like shit? Or is she trash because she continues to be a trash person who has no respect for people's time?
You're both trash. Absolutely both trash. Sis really thought that she can really pull up every time and time again 3 hours late. And you really thought that she was going to change her behavior based on no critique. You're both trash. Next question. But also, I want to jump back. Bobo, what, in your opinion, what are some pink flags? Because mine are very specific, and I know that people out there who leave their mugs too close to the table edge are mad. So save them.
No, but it does make sense. If you're leaving your plate on the edge of the table, do you not value your life? Those type of people will kill you in the middle of the night. They will set your house on fire.
Oh my gosh.
Some pink flags for me. Yeah, so being late on a date, that's definitely a pink flag.
And how late is late?
I'm going to say more than 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to say more than 20 minutes. That's definitely a pink flag. Having too much time is a pink.
Yes!
Listen, you know those people who text you all the time?
Wow!
I low-key like the torture, and maybe I'm a masochist, but I low-key like the torture of waiting for someone that I'm into to text me back.
Teaches you patience.
Knowing that you're doing something with your life. Don't text me back immediately. I will cheat on you.
Okay, but also for any of my boos listening, because you always are, text me back as soon as I text you. Don't play this game. I'm not Bobo. I will move on. I will find out who your best friend is.
I'm crying.
And you can insert the rest here.
Wow, Aries energy is wild. And we're in the middle of Aries season 2, so it's a lot. Yeah, having too much time on your hands is definitely a red flag. What else is it? You know what's a friendship red flag?
A red or pink?
Oh, yes. Pink flag. And because this is something that I should have, realized very early on. But I had a friend who could not maintain friendships. Oh. And she always used to complain. Yeah, she always used to be like, you know what? People are trash. You just can't trust any hoes out in this world. All you have is yourself. I've just had so many friends and none of them have ever been consistent or loyal to me. And later down the line, I'm like, but bitch, you're trash though. Of course you can't maintain a friendship because you don't have the range. You don't have the compassion.
You can't compete if you don't compare.
Yeah. So someone who really struggles to maintain. And on some hand, I also feel very uncompassionate saying that, because I'm someone who makes friends relatively easily. And so when people are like, hey, like, I just can never make friends, I just wonder, like, is that because of who you are, like your behavior, or is that really your environment? I can't imagine. So that's a pink flag for me, but I can see how it's not a pink flag for, like...
Absolutely.
I don't know, maybe someone with social anxiety or whatever the case is. But something that I struggle with personally is, like, boundaries. And when it comes to romantic relationships, it's especially, I can never quite tell whether I'm settling or whether I'm compromising on something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, right now in my relationship, we have an issue where, like, this is going to sound really contradictory because I said I kind of like guys.
Uh-oh. Already know.
You already know.
I already know, but please tell the community.
So we have an issue where, like, we don't really see each other enough. We don't get to see each other enough or, like, talk enough because he's busy and I'm busy, and he especially, you know, he is an artist and he's very passionate and dedicated to his craft, which I love. I think it's the best thing ever in the world. But at the same time, like, I want to see you more often. And so I can't tell if me being like, fine, I'll see you once every other week, is me compromising, or is that me settling? Like, when do you know when you're settling versus compromising?
I think when you settle, it's in spite of you. And when you compromise, it's for the benefit of both of you.
That's a good metric.
Sometimes I feel profound and things I didn't have anything else to say. I said what I said with that one. It's an interesting one because I think when I look at the situation, I say, okay, Bobo's taken the time out to see her partner's point of view and to understand that she may not be able to see him as often as she wants to because she understands that he loves his craft. I would ask, is he giving you the same courtesy and saying, oh, okay, am I sacrificing as much as she is for me? Like I said before, I think relationships are transactional, and when one is giving more than the other, you have to restore balance in some way. Right. And if you're going to I think compromise is rooted in balance as well, and balance is transactional. So it's compromise until you're the only one compromising, and then it's settling.
Wow. Yeah, I think he's willing to, like, work with me and be like, okay, like, let's try and find a solution. So if I can't see you in the flesh that often, maybe we can, like, talk on the phone more often or text more. You know what I mean? But it's like, if that's still not enough, to what extent then? You know, just situations like that. If that's still not enough, to what extent is that settling versus compromising in relationships? And I think that's where it gets tricky. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where you're with someone that you love, or you're talking to someone that you love, and they just have that one thing that you're not a fan of? How do you know whether to, like, leave or to stay and work with it?
I've got a great example.
Yeah,
so
talk to us.
My last long-term relationship, he was very dependent on the ganja, the weed.
Oh, no.
To the point where he'd be on and off it in manic cycles. So, like, smoking so much, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then he'd get off it, go to therapy, start working out, start eating well. Then he'd get on it, and everything would spiral. He'd go downhill, be super depressed, super anxious, super suicidal. Then back on it, and he's loving life, and everything is great, and I'm going to therapy, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So my internal conflict was, if he's working on it, then is that not compromise? Like, shouldn't I allow the ups and downs because he's actively working on it? And everybody who has an addictive personality struggles with figuring out what balance is. So maybe this is balance in his head. You know, maybe this is realistically what it's going to look like. And for me, I think the tipping point was, if number one, you're invited into someone's space in life, and you're, number two, going to choose to stay in their space of life, you have to be mindful that that's also your choice. And if things are affecting you negatively, you can only blame the other person for that to a point.
Right.
It goes back to when someone shows you who they are, believe them. You can only, people evolve, they don't change. And so these things that come up as deal breakers and red flags, they're not going to change. They're going to transition. So maybe he was going to smoke a little bit less and go to therapy a little bit more. Or maybe he was going to not go to therapy and just work out a little bit. And he wasn't going to smoke, he was going to juul instead. It always would have been something else.
Yeah.
So I had to acknowledge, is it the substance or the inconsistency in behavior? And it was the inconsistency in behavior, and I just can't have that, you know?
Wow.
And honestly, you can't tell people how to be better for you and expect them to do it. That's just the nature of of being in relationships. Right. And we talked about it a little bit in maybe the first or second episode, the distinction we make between having standards but not having expectations. And people have queried me about this for weeks since we said that. Yeah. My whole thing is, my standards are things that keep me grounded to, you know, experiences that keep me happy or that keep me balanced. So my standards for relationships are that you share with me, you communicate openly with me, you appreciate my perspective, you appreciate that I want to grow, you also want to grow, you have ambition. These are all standards that I have for situations I would prefer to be in. It is my responsibility to communicate those standards and ask you what yours are, and with those both in mind, we create a separate understanding that is the basis for our relationship. So if I say I want to hang out every day and you say you want to hang out once a week, we both communicated our standards, and then with that we say, okay, we can hang out twice a week. That's what's fair. We both compromised here. Right. A standard is not me saying I only want to be in a relationship with someone who pays for every meal, and then I give that to you, and then you say you can't afford to, and I say, well, that's how it's got to be. That's not a standard. That's an ultimatum. We don't give ultimatums. Yeah. Because you're never going to get the response you want to, because people don't want to be challenged that way. No, I'm not going to do what you want because you want it. I want you to acknowledge what I want, what you want, and with those two in mind, we'll create, you know, something that's beneficial for both of us. Now, when I say not to have expectations, the whole idea about setting standards is that you give your partner, you know, a benchmark or context for your behavior and your wants and your needs and your likes and your dislikes. That's not rules or guidelines. It's just context. And if the person you're dealing with can't see context for your behavior and chooses to ignore it or chooses to dismiss it, then you need to acknowledge that and say, if they don't see me like I want to be seen, I've got to bounce. You know what I mean? Wow. You can't have expectations for how someone's going to respond to what your standards are. So your standards, are your due diligence. That's you saying, I said what I said, I communicated it clearly. If they don't meet me halfway, it's because they don't want to compromise or they don't see it for me. And you need to acknowledge that and figure out whether you or not you want to stay. You can't resent someone if you chose to stay. Ooh. In a non-abusive sense also. Yeah. Like, you know, put some boundaries around that. But yeah, you can't resent somebody for their behavior if you chose to stay. That's why I say with these pink flags, red flags, deal breakers, compromising, settling, be mindful. But these are all choices that you continue to make every time you choose to engage in a relationship with this person. Right. Like, so when it gets to be too much and you reach tipping point, come on now.
The only thing I would add to the conversation about expectations versus standards is that a standard is something that you set for yourself that you are enforcing on your terms. An expectation is something that is a requirement that you're placing on someone else in order to make you happy. Wow! The gag is that actually no one has the range to make you happy. You create your own standards because those standards are enforced and created and applied by you to maintain your own happiness, and you don't place that on someone else because that's not anyone else's job. And so I think that's also where I would draw the line. But also something that I think about a lot is the idea of unconditional love. No. And before we even get into it. No. You know, we really romanticize unconditional love, agape love. And is that a realistic concept for you?
No.
Why not?
Everything in my life is conditional. It's subject to change, to movement, to fluidity. Mm-hmm. Why would I pick to choose to love this common stranger unconditionally? For what? Like, that's the thing. What kind of fool's move is that?
Do you choose to love people, or do you just
You
fall
choose.
into it? But there's the idea of the fall, you know, when it comes to romantic love. There's the idea of the fall. So you fall into love, which means you really don't have much control over it. Or rather, it's something that's overtaking you. It's a desire that's overtaking you. And so now that you're left without choice, just falling in love with this person, but they have their flaws because they're human beings and they have their shortcomings. Is it possible to choose to love them unconditionally, or is that just not realistic?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I refuse to love someone unconditionally because that's just a weird grey area that I'm not trying to sit into. I feel like conditionally, like, love is conditional, behavior is conditional. You can't just act out or run amok and then because I love you, I'm not going to say anything or just deal with it because, no. What do you mean? No.
All right, well, on that note, I think this is where we have to close up before everything dies. Did we have any questions that were relevant to this topic?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Let me just go. Let me look. This person said, I had another thought on red flags versus deal breakers, and a clear example to me would be that a red flag is whining about not liking condoms, and a deal breaker is being anti-abortion.
Ooh.
Very interesting. So that is a good distinction to make. And also a warning for anybody, be really, really mindful of people who are open to changing for you, a common stranger, at the very early stages of your relationship.
Ooh.
Somebody who's lived on this earth for so many years shouldn't be so quick to give up their wants and needs in favor of yours because they like you. Spooky. And also, another good thing to keep in mind is when you're in those early stages of navigating deal breakers, pink flags, red flags, compromising standards, expectations, think about who you're doing it for. Are you insecure and you like the validation of being wanted by someone, or are you really attaching yourself to this person and disregarding the things that you think are vital because you think that they make you better or they make you whatever? Because very important distinction.
That's true.
Unpack your behavior, people.
And it's easy to fall into the subject-object dynamic of romance because that's how it's been constructed. You know, one person is the subject and the other person is the object. But the thing is, if you are the object of my desire, now I feel like I have to perform for you in order to maintain that. And it's just really important to like keep that in mind. And just keep in mind whenever you're playing into these like harmful dynamics, you know?
And one last question before we go, Bobo. If you had to sum it up in the most concise way possible, how do we know when we are looking at a red flag? Like, what is the telltale sign that it's a red flag we need to bounce?
It's just it's an immediate feeling in your, I don't know where you feel your instinctual feelings. For some people it's in their stomach, for some people it's in their chest, but it's literally just a feeling of nah, not this. And a lot of times if you're really into someone, that feeling is very easy to overlook. I
would say the way I can see and dodge red flags is like, you know, when you're walking down like a busy street in the city and there's like, you know, one of those Oxfam or Greenpeace people trying to get your attention, and then you see them, but then you kind of like walk around them, you try not to like, you know, stop or say anything, and when you do like, oh no, I'm busy, it's that clear, it's in your face, you already done seen it, you've already planned how you're gonna dodge it. And then you waddle around it. That's how clear the red flags are. And like, if you are my kid and you like to waste your time, then more power to you, because I've been doing that shit all day. But the red flags are always clear. Or even like when you're walking in the city and then like there's some man who's catcalling you from across the way and he's like, hey, you don't see me? Hey, I'm talking to you. And you like, you pretend that your headphones are in, but you know, there's no music playing. It's that clear to you. Like it's overwhelming you, and yet you still pretend that you don't see it. And that is my sermon.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your TED Talk. But those are the clearest ways of identifying red flags, pink flags, and all the flags in between. So yeah, now that my ring light has died, This is wild, hey?
Do you see what we go through to film and record?
Jesus. Guys, we've gone through so much for you. Maybe what we'll do is we'll record our What Would Bobo and Flex Do, because those are quite short. But let us know what else you'd like us to talk about. If you have any questions for us to answer in future episodes, the easiest thing to do is to DM us on our Instagram account, Bobo and Flex. Don't DM us individually, because we each get hundreds of DMs a day, so the chances of us seeing it are very slim. However, if you follow us at Bobo and Flex on Instagram and you DM us, we will see your question, we will respond. And don't forget to subscribe. We're on Apple Music, we're on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud. Give us a nice review, because it helps us grow and create more content. And it'll help us have a live event so we can see your beautiful faces in the flesh.
True.
Wouldn't you love that? Let us know if you'd like a live event. We have some games planned. It's going to be really fun. So, thank you again for listening. This has been a beautiful episode, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.